All right, so I'm wrapping up, hooking up my dome pressure sensor.
I got this thing on Amazon because it was considerably cheaper than the Holley sensor, and it says 0 to 100 psi and 0.5 to 4.5 volts, so it was very easy to configure as well.
I've got my output already ran, as we did earlier. Did a ground. I ran my ground just right here where my catch can's mounted. And then lastly, I have my 12 volt power. I ended up pulling power from my switched ignition power inside. I'm gonna run this 12 volt input here over to where my MAC valves are on the other side. Right there. And I'm just gonna bunch them all together and make one connection there. I guess it makes sense to me that the whole boost pressure and boost system runs off the same 12 volt. That way if one fails, they all fail, or that's the thought. So anyways, I'm gonna get to soldering some wires and heat shrinking some wires, and that'll be that.
If there was ever a time to solder, it's now. You've got a lot of time, work, and money into this project, and it sucked to blow it up with a 2-cent butt connector.
Got a little solder on there. Slip my heat shrink down around here. There we go. Now I will pull this wire back up into the loom, try to keep this as neat as possible.
That green wire I'm messing with here is the dome pressure sensor output wire, which I've already ran from the dome pressure sensor over to the input output section, and we'll go over that here in a minute.
Running through this piece of tube over there, try to clean this engine bay up, and kind of been wiring this as I go, and I'm kind of letting the, it's starting to look a little sloppy, so I'll definitely tidy this up at some point, but I don't know, maybe some points now. Whatever. Anyways, moving forward. So I've got, again, I ran my MAC valves off the grounding circuit, off the Terminator X. That was the only two output pulsed, there's two grounded pulsed outputs, so I chose to go with pulsed negative on the output from the Terminator X. So that is already running to my MAC valves, and now I have just to power the other side of my MAC valves. So I've got those two guys bundled up right here. I've got my power from my ignition power inside. I've got my ignition power that I need for my dome pressure sensor. I've got them all tied together in this little wad. I'm gonna take the old solder and we're gonna make some solder on these guys. It's a big wad of wire, it'll take a minute. Starting to smoke. We'll put some solder on there, lots, because it's lots of wire. And that should be pretty permanent. Let that cool down for a second. We'll slide the heat shrink over it. And short of configuring in my laptop with configuring my computer, that should be everything I need for the Terminator X boost control. Now, I get to go configure my laptop inside for the pulse negative. I forget what pins they are. I'll show that right here.
So any input on the Holley can be configured as a 5-volt input, which my dome pressure sensor is, so that was an easy decision. As far as the MAC valves go, I chose to use two pulse negative outputs because I figure I'm not going to miss the negative outputs later, and I wanted to have them on the same type of circuit to keep things way less confusing.
And then, yeah, so I've got running off ground pulse. I've got my switch power coming here. I need my power for my dome pressure sensor. They're all coming right here, big wad, boom. That's pretty solid. Slip this heat shrink over this. Get my micro jet. And we will heat shrink this gang of wires here. I'll figure out something to tidy this little bit up. This is where everything comes through my firewall. It's kind of hard to make a nice corner here. I've got my power and switched inputs or powers into my Holley harness. That's that. So I think that concludes the wiring up, my boost control, dome pressure sensor, etc. I got to configure the Terminator X now, get the laptop out. I filled my CO2 bottle at work. Just so happens I manage a weld shop and we've got lots and lots of CO2. Built my little adapter for off the shop gas. And yeah, hopefully we're boosting and controlling the boosting like soon. That's that.